We're going to start this unit by learning some simple commands in Linux. First, a few simple commands for us to get familiar with Linux. We're going to use the SSH command to connect to our machines first. So I'm going to SSH into my VM. And a few things that might be useful when we first connect to our machine first is I want to know who am I, right? So who am I tells me what my username is. If I want to know what directory I'm in, I can use pwd for print working directory. And again, these are all pretty basic commands. There's the echo command, and so if I echo hello, oops, I spelled hello wrong. It'll just echo whatever I typed into those quotes. There are different kinds of quotes. You can use both quotes. We're going to talk more later on about why we would use one quote versus the other. But we'll get into that later. Some other commands I have in my list here. So hostname will tell us what is the host name of the VM. So this one is CST06225-1, right? You might want to know what architecture your system is. If you type Arch, it'll tell you whether it's 64-bit or 32-bit. You can see mine is a 64-bit. If I type uname, it's going to tell me about the operating system, right? So it tells me I'm on Linux. It could say something like Unix or BSD or something like that. One other command, in case you need it, PASSWD will allow you to change the password for the currently logged in user. One other thing I want you to be aware of is that if you want to run as root, right? So if you want to run your Linux install as root, you can type su, and then you can put in the root password, which you set earlier in the course, and it'll switch you to that # prompt, which means that you have elevated privileges. So that'll let you run as root. A lot of times we need to run as root to do certain commands in this course. In the lab instructions, I also showed you how to set up your user so you can use the sudo command in front of commands if you're not logged in as root. From a security perspective, it's better to do it that way. But since we're learning here, sometimes it's easier just to use su so you don't have to remember to prefix every command with sudo as you're going through some of the lab exercises. When we start to learn about commands, you're going to see the syntax written either in the textbook or you might see some documentation. So under simple commands, I showed you commands that didn't have any options. But in many cases, there are extra options that we're going to add. Hopefully you remember this from your Linux administration course. And again, a lot of this is going to be review in this unit. But nearly all the commands have some kind of options that we can add. So for example, -F for force in some commands, or -H for help, and that's a useful one, right? Because if you're not sure what options are available, you can always try -H or --help, and a lot of times that'll give you some more information. So nearly all the commands are going to require or allow some kind of parameters. And depending on the instruction, the parameters could be files, directories, the usernames or UIDs, process IDs, and so forth. All kinds of different things. So to view the command's man page, that's going to show you all the different options and parameters, which we're going to cover later. I'm going to talk more about the different help that's available to us from the console. So an example is, in the next slide, I'm going to show you how to use the ls command, which shows you how to do directory listings. And you'll see some of the options that you can use with the ls command. And again, it's just a very basic option of a command with some options. Another set of commands that'll be useful for you is the long listing, or ls command. If you just type ls, it's going to show you the contents of a directory. Of course, the directory I'm in right now doesn't have any files. So I'm going to use the cd command, or change directory. So that's going to change to a different directory. Now before I do that, it's helpful to use pwd to see where I am. So if I type cd, or change directory ... that's going to move me up one directory. You can see now I went from home student to just home. And if I type ls, I can see there are two files in the home directory, green b, which is my Google user account, and then student, which is my user account that I created. If I want to see a longer list of directories, I can go into a different directory. So I'm just going to go into the Etsy directory so I can see a longer list when I type ls. So you can see there's a lot more stuff in this directory. There's a little bit of color coding in here. We're going to learn how to customize that color coding later on in this unit. But there are some switches for the ls command. So for example, if I type ls-l, it's going to give me a little more information. It tells me the ownership of the file. It also tells me what operations are allowed for the owner, the group, and for all users for that particular file. And it also shows me if files are links, which again, we're going to learn about that later in the course, links, hard links, and soft links. You can also use AS-A to show not only all the files, but also hidden files. For example, if I go back to my home directory, so now I'm back in my home directory, you can see, and I'm going to type ls-a. So when I just typed ls, there was no files or no folders in that directory. But when I type -a, it shows me more stuff, right? So those little dots in front of a file name means that that's a hidden file. So it's going to show me those files when I type -a. I can combine them, so I could have both -a and l together. You don't have to separate them. You can just put all the options right in a row. So now I get that nice listing that shows me the ownership of the files as well as the operations that are permitted, and I can see the hidden files all together. To see more options for the ls command, we're going to learn how to do that when we look at help.